Okay, I'll call the budget meeting to order, 7 o'clock, and this is a little less formal. We are streaming these budget meetings because they are Board of Selectmen, technically board meetings. And we invite the Board of Finance to come and hear what we're dealing with, because eventually this is a Board of Finance makes the final changes or decisions on the budget. John, you're looking at me like. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. So we call the different department heads, and especially with the bigger budgets. And Chris is here tonight to go over his budget, his operating budget, with the Board of Selectmen. Nothing's been changed in your budget from what has been presented by me, correct?
We did change one.
What we
thing.
changed?
We changed the salary of the chief and the captain. We changed it to average, state average.
To the state average, that's the only difference we made. So I'll open it up for Selectmen. Do you have any questions on?
What did we change those to? Because on the backup sheet, it shows, I think, the department's request.
We
It
have
shows
the request.
150 and 120 for the chief and the,
And then what we did, Jason, we changed it based upon the percentage average of all the chiefs and the captains in the states. We changed it to that number of the.
I was wondering
highest
what the number, the,
So 135 for the chief and 115 for the captain.
okay, so it's 135 and 115? Because that's, I didn't see that in the back. Yeah.
John?
Does that stamping structure fit within the numbers of the ordinance?
Yes.
So we're just rearranging?
You have to push the button. Yes.
Thank you.
So the question was is that the staffing numbers, what was put into the ordinance? The answer is yes.
Jeff?
Hey, Mary, the 208.
Get it close, John?
Just John.
Just a question for Sergeant Grillo and for Dan. As far as the chief and the pension goes, is the chief going to be covered under the police pension or be part of the town's contributory pension?
Defined contribution plan, John. The defined contribution plan.
Okay, thank you.
Anyone else?
I am curious. We did a very deep dive into what it might cost to have a larger department, and we anticipated that it would cost about 1% more than last year. And I'm puzzled about how we can give all our officers raises by the contract, have higher fuel costs and the new department, and come in at less than 1% increase. Someone want to wax eloquent about that?
I could start on some of it, and Chris could probably finish it, John. If we look at the resident trooper, what we paid for the resident trooper and the resident trooper overtime, those two costs would cover the operational costs of a chief and a captain, so that was relatively flat. And then Chris was able to find other savings in this budget that brought it down to almost flat for the year. Even though our gas, matter of fact, our gas actually this year is going to be less because we locked in about 30 cents less a gallon for gasoline over last year.
How much of an overlap do you have planned between the chief and the resident trooper?
I think
Is
Chris
that
could
this year or is that in next year?
We were hoping to have it, the chief set by July 1st. We just have to get moving on that
And
process.
the resident trooper gone by July 1st?
If we had some overlap, we would, but ideally, we wouldn't. Ideally, we'd have the chief in place before July 1st in this year.
I think the financial plan that we told the public about funded a 1-month
It did.
overlap. Whether they do it or not that's an administrative thing.
Yeah, at one point, we were even talking a couple or 3 months, I think. But,
Or
or at
it
up
didn't
to
end up-
3 months, maybe. We were hoping it would be less because that was a big chunk of the incremental cost.
I think it
Of the
really
switch.
depends on who we hire as the chief as well,
Yeah,
how much they need.
obviously, yeah. So, okay, thanks.
I think to the money that was supposed to come out of this year somewhere was about $50,000 for the overlap and the cash flow to fit out the chief and do the stuff, whatever that was.
Yeah, we have the radio.
Where are we with that?
We have the radio, which we have the radio reserve, which we take the chief's radio out of there. The chief's vehicle would be in the vehicle replacement plan, John.
Okay. Question, if we're gonna have, captains, those are the white shirt guys that aren't in the union, I guess?
Correct.
Would the captain get a permanent car like the chief gets a permanent car? We only planned on one extra car.
I don't believe, Chris, you would probably know more than I do. There's in most cases, I believe just the chief, right, gets the car?
Most departments, usually any rank from lieutenant on up has their own personal car.
Got it,
Yeah.
okay.
So we got a car to deal with, an extra car that we didn't plan, okay.
Just one further question on looking at the averages for the captain and the chief. Did you look at statewide, were the big cities included, or did you look at towns?
We
Comparable to
looked at
us.
comparable towns to us and also surrounding towns, John.
Okay, thank you.
To the point before about John had asked how we manage this less than 1%. He said we were able to find some further savings and things like that. I mean, are these one-time savings? Are they efficiencies that are going to be ongoing? Are we going to be looking at some sort of big jump next year after this year we found these savings? What are we talking about exactly?
I actually think that, I mean, and Chris built the budget, but I think he's done a good job, and I think they are not one-time, I think they're long-term efficiencies. Now, you can't tell, the price of gasoline could spike up again next year and we lock in. But other than that, I think we've done, or Chris has done a pretty good job putting this together, finding all the efficiencies in there.
The fiscal department gives us the averages, and those are very helpful when putting these together. We have a fleet that has the older cars in the fleet have some high mileage. Those cars are coming out. Those are the cars that we need to keep running, but they do cost us money. For example, we had to put a transmission in a car this year that had over 100,000 miles. We need the car. If we buy a car, it takes months and months to get the car ordered, to get it in, and then it takes months to get it upfitted. It could be 5-6 months from the time we order the car to the time we have it on the road. So unfortunately, we do have to put some money into some high mileage cars sometimes just to keep cars on the road. So unfortunately, we did have to put some money in cars this year, but we do have some new cars that are almost done. So we'll have some lower mile cars in the fleet, which should equate to less maintenance costs. And like Dan said, with the lower fuel cost, we should be pretty good with the fuel. There's some programs that we had in the past that we no longer have, that we were able to take out of the budget, which really weren't, big dollar savings. The big thing, like Dan also said, was the resident trooper cost and the resident trooper overtime that we're able to, feed back into the budget.
There were some other costs identified in the committee, like overtime for prisoner retention, some dues. Is that all baked into this as well?
Yeah, yes it is. There's been, so we added for additional equipment and stuff, it's just separated into lines. So like the uniform line, you'll see it's up a little bit to equate for some of that.
Could you talk about the patrol schedule and how it would be affected with, I imagine the chief and the captain aren't going to be on patrol, and we would end up with, 3 sergeants under that model? Or 4, and you're 3 sergeants. today we have
We have 3 sergeants now.
3 sergeants now.
The town has the town has 3 sergeants. We have the resident trooper sergeant. Absent any of those, we have the sergeant at the troop that's available. We also have the master sergeant lieutenant. So the command structure is bigger than what the town currently has as town officers. That, I think, is a separate discussion for whoever's going to be in the position to make that decision of how to structure the police department and what there is for rank, and obviously, you know, to make it work within the budget.
I think that goes to the heart of my question. We've always been concerned about the level of patrol and the overtime it takes when you guys on workers' comp, and to make sure there's the patrol schedule is maintained. Do I think incorrectly that 3 sergeants, a captain, and a chief will be, assuming it's all fully staffed, is going to give us less patrol than we have now?
That depends on who's in charge and who is making that decision on how the command structure is set up and what the sergeants really, because that's the patrol supervision, what they're responsible for. There's a lot of different models. There's a lot of different ways that you can put that command structure together. And, you know, one way is to have working patrol sergeants. You know, for liability, there should always be supervision on every shift. You know, that's my opinion, and I think that'll be probably across the board, anybody you talk to in law enforcement, that there should be supervision on these shifts. You need a command officer making decisions on to terminate pursuits. If there's a department accident of a motor vehicle where, you know, a town car is involved in an accident, you should have a supervisor investigating that accident. You shouldn't have another patrol guy investigating. So there should be supervision on every shift. But it doesn't mean that the sergeant doesn't take patrol and patrol the town. They're not set to the office. It's a patrol supervisor where their main goal and focus is to be on the road, be patrolling, and make sure that they have oversight of the patrols.
So I think I heard you say that with the new structure, it can be organized to maintain the same level of patrol we now have.
Oh, absolutely.
It can be. Whether or not it is, that's up to the first selectman and the chief and
Right,
the
right.
poobahs, okay.
Right. And there's ways to do that, to have a supervisor and empty shift within this current budget here. Even though it doesn't specifically spell out that there's going to be supervision, there's models that can be formed to make it fit to the budget.
Thank you.
Well, I think I guess that's the question, is whether there's different models, but from the standpoint of this meeting, is there much volatility in terms of the cost of those models? You know, I mean, is there going to be like, you know, is somebody going to come on board and say, well, I want this model, and it's going to not fit into the budget?
Well, I think it has to fit into the budget. I mean, we promised the town, when we voted to organize, that we wouldn't have a spike in the budget. And I think that as the town, you know, the people that make the decisions for the town, that we're responsible to hold up to that, you know, what we said and what we were going to do. But there's ways that you can make 24/7 supervision within this town, within that budget.
Okay, great, thanks.
I think we also looked, with the committee, when we looked into it, we looked at other operating departments that had models that showed supervision as part of the police group that met to look at this. There were models that worked within it. Whether that's the structure that's going to be, that would have to be determined. That's the understanding that how it would be structured. 4 years from now, who knows?
In your budget message, you had indicated a capital item for weapons replacement and that cost. Could you talk about that for a few minutes? How often do we have to do that, or should it be done, or what's the best practice and the cost?
Yeah, the best practice is generally about 10 years. However, that's not a hard number. That doesn't mean when we hit year 10 with these weapons that we're going to have to purchase new weapons. I just think it's important to start talking about it now, because it's probably a significant purchase. It's probably about $35,000 by the time that you do the weapons, the holsters, you know, the sights, any weapon-mounted lights to it. You're going to be up about $35,000. So I think it's important, even though we're years out from it, just to mention it now, and then maybe even start planning if, I don't know if a reserve account is for that amount of money is something to think about and just put a small amount in each year, or just, wait and do a capital for that amount. But it doesn't mean when we get to that year that we're definitely gonna have to replace weapons. We inspect them monthly, we do an annual inspection on them, so we make sure that, they are safe, they're within tolerances and there's no issues with them. So when we get to that year, it doesn't mean like, okay, we definitely have to replace them. We could get to that year and say, everything still looks good, we're not having any problems on the range with them, there's no malfunctions, there's no major signs of wear, let's go another year, and, so we could go beyond that.
So Chris, is it, in this case, is it all or none? So if we get a new officer, could we buy a newer gun with a light and a sight on it, or do we have to do all of them at the same time?
It's best to do the entire department at the same time, yeah. So everybody's trained on the same platform,
Okay.
yeah. Then it's one ammunition, instead of buying multiple ammunitions.
Just one more question for me for Dan. On the issue of the cost of extra duty that we charge when we have somebody doing road work or what the schools use and so forth. When we calculate what we charge for that, naturally, we're going to charge for payroll and pension and things like that. Now, we also have vehicles sitting there. Do we have some type of a vehicle charge included in that?
We don't specifically charge for the vehicle, John, but for every private duty job, we charge an administrative fee of 18%.
Okay.
Which in that would cover the cost of the vehicle and then the finance office of doing the billing and the receivables and things like that.
Okay, thank you.
And the pension is not included into the extra duty for the officers, so there's no extra charge for
Yeah,
the pension.
those hours are not pensionable,
Oh,
so.
so they don't get.
They don't get a pension
Their
on those
hours
hours.
for the pension and salary for the pension is not
They're-
including those extra duty officers.
When we calculate the highest 36 for a police officer when they do retire, we deduct the private duty hours from there.
Thank you.
Anyone else?
The hiring we're doing now, that's for number 25?
Correct, it's for number
So we're at
25.
24, and okay, so that's good.
Oh, yeah, this budget calls for the full authorization under the ordinance, correct?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Any other questions of the budget, or Chris?
Last question, just a little bit farther. What are the opportunities for having non-sworn personnel do more what some of our sworn officers are doing? Not trying to get around the ordinance of sworn officers. Does it make sense to think about having another body? I'm concerned about patrol. We've got to keep the patrol schedule up. Another body there that can do a lot of the paperwork, filling it out, and then some guy's got to sign it. Does that make any sense to think about in the future or now?
Well, I'd very much agree with, if it doesn't take a gun and a badge to do it, you shouldn't be having somebody with a gun and a badge to do it. I mean, police officers are expensive, right? I mean, there's no way about it. And if we can get somebody to do work that doesn't require law enforcement training, we should be. Right now, I don't think that would help us any, maybe in the future, but we definitely, I mean, I know I always think about it, if there's a way to get, somebody in there to do something that, doesn't require an officer to do it. One thing that we are juggling with now that's becoming a little burdensome is the body cams. We do, I think last year we did somewhere around like 30 or 40 FOIs, and now they're primarily coming in for body cams. And now I think we've probably done already 10 or 12 this year already. And they take a while because you have to review them, and if you have multiple officers on scene and you have multiple vehicles there, that takes a lot. And that's one thing that I've been thinking about, that maybe somewhere down the road we can have a civilian do it, and then have somebody just oversee it. So, but yeah, that's definitely a good thought.
There are two admins in the PD also. So-
Yes, yeah, that we currently use.
So
for a lot of
maybe,
things.
that may be part of training with those individuals as part of it.
And I believe we utilized their services for the accreditation, right, doing some of the accreditation work?
Yes, yeah.
Which was helpful. Didn't require a, uniformed police officer to sit there and type out the stuff. They were able to do it.
Okay?
I've said enough.
We have, Chris is also responsible for the communication, which is our dispatch. And another one that seems pretty flat to, actually was a $119 increase over last year.
John?
We recently, at the Board of Finance, had a transfer to cover overtime and dispatch because people are leaving. This has been going on for decades. What's the problem? Are we not paying people enough? Are we competitive? Is there something about the work environment that's?
It's a tough work environment. I think the pay's competitive, and I haven't done a deep dive into the salaries in a while, but I think the pay's competitive. I don't think we're too far off. It's a tough job. It's demanding. It's nights, weekends, holidays. It's long hours. They're confined to that one room, for the duration of their 8, sometimes 16-hour shift. The other thing that we have always run a small crew for dispatch. We have 5 full-time dispatchers. So the second we lose one dispatcher, we're short.
Overtime.
We're short, yeah. Which, that's the case right now, unfortunately. We had one dispatcher, he went all the way through training, and then for personal reasons, he left. So it's tough because we train people and we hope to retain them, but everybody has their own things going on, and sometimes it's out of our control. We try and create a great environment for them, and we do the best that we can within within our ability to make it a good work environment. So I don't think the pay's the issue. I don't think it's a bad work environment. I just think it's a tough job, and if you look across the board, people that have dispatch positions, if there's not a pension there, it's not a job generally that people stay in for too long.
Am I reading this right? The $64,000 is the estimated actual for the rest of this year, and then for overtime, which covers the shrinkage, and then we're back to 44. Is that realistic?
If we were fully staffed, those overtime numbers would come down. We're covering a lot of the shift in the overtime. And we are interviewing some candidates right now, so hopefully we'll be fully staffed as we go into next year.
Chris, just a question on dispatch. You say sometimes they work 10-hour shifts and so forth and so on. Would it, and that's going to involve overtime and so forth, would it pay, and I think getting to John's numbers, would it pay?
Closer to the mic, John?
Okay. Would it pay to add somebody to the staff, cut those hours back to a standard workday, and then maybe not run into so much overtime?
It's a 8-hour workday, an 8.25-hour workday for them. If they're working a double, then it would be a 16-hour day, but their standard day is 8.25 hours. I think we're not probably too far off from having to do some research and see if we should go from 5 to 6-time full-time dispatchers. Generally, we try and cover a 9 to 5 shift, so we have a 7 to 3, a 3 to 11. We have a 9 to 5 that splits the busy time. Our bell curve for the busy hours are 8 in the morning to 6 p.m. So we have a 9 to 5 shift that kind of covers that busy time. When we're short a dispatcher, we take that 9 to 5 shift out because that would be an overtime shift every day plus all the other overtime shifts. So we eliminate that shift. But I think at some point, it's probably worth, in the near future, it's worth some research to see, should we have 2 dispatchers on day shift and 2 dispatchers on an evening shift? I don't think we're far from looking into that.
And if that were to be the case, we'd have to take a close look at outsourcing dispatch. Many departments do.
And we looked, just so everyone's aware, we looked at the salaries of every employee in town hall and where they are in comparison to like towns, which would be similar grand list, similar tax structure, population, and we're at about 90% of our dispatches of pay to like towns. So we're a little short to Lyketown. So
90%
So our salaries is at 90% of the average of
of the...
like towns. We're about 10% short
We do exit interviews with these folks?
with every employee when they leave. With every employee when they leave.
And is there a theme within the dispatchers who leave that is, we can do something about? If they get pregnant, if they
Yeah.
go to college, if they move out of state, there's a whole bunch of things they leave for that we couldn't do anything about. But is there a theme about things we can do something about?
I think benefits are the big one. Benefits are the big one.
Of the last two dispatchers, one left for a little bit more pay and for a department head a pension. And then the other one was personal reasons, which we can't obviously do anything about.
Yes, sir.
I guess I'm wondering, and you had mentioned one before where you said, you know, they go through the training, et cetera, and, but for various reasons, you know, one left very shortly after being fully trained, but that was personal reasons. But then you mentioned some who might be leaving for benefits from other departments, et cetera, and there's nothing that we can say or do or build in to say that, you know, after we pay for this training, we do everything that we need to do to get you ready, that you at least have to give us, you know, 6 months or something like that. You know, I don't believe that there's anything, or is that in the Board of Selectmen's power?
No, it's a right to work.
Yeah.
The only, in the police world today, there is if you go through academy and you get hired, and someone else hires you, you can go to work, but the municipality that hires has to pay a certain amount back.
Yeah, that was what I was kind of thinking, you know, in a former
But
life,
it's-
we used to have
yeah,
the
it's a right to
opposite
work
problem where it
state.
came from. People
You can-
didn't
you-
come here.
Unfortunately, you can train, get someone up and trained. It's part of business.
One of the things I think was a really good idea that Chris and Tony Armino Tony Armino supervises dispatch, they came to us with an idea, I think it was last week, that maybe we look at some sort of a longevity pay for people that are a dispatcher for 5, like we do with our police officers. Or do we tier the salary? Because right now, our first-year dispatcher is the same salary as someone that was there for 10 years. Do we tier that salary structure so people that are here longer have a greater incentive to stay? And that's something maybe we should look at throughout the year, next year, if we want to do that or not. But I thought that was a pretty good idea as far as retaining people.
So on the bright side, I want to say this. I mean, as much as you're hearing about replacement, many years ago, or not a lot of years ago, I looked at Northwest Communications. They do dispatching, and another municipality offered to do our dispatching. And I said, okay, give me a number. Give me a number to do the dispatching. The number they gave me was higher than what it cost to operate as we are now. So I wouldn't look at this as how are we losing people, what the number is. I think right now, that's why I didn't pursue it, because we were more efficient running it this way than we were to outsource it. That may have changed, but I don't think so.
What's
sorry, go ahead.
what's the turnaround on like when you lose a dispatcher, how long does it take to replace them?
It could be about 6 months before they're working. You know, if we can get through the hiring process quickly and get somebody in, get their background done, get them trained. I mean, 6 months would be very fast, but that's
Is there any way
probably
we
the
can cut
minimum.
that down?
I'm sorry?
Is there any way we can cut that down?
No,
No?
because it takes time. We have to put the posting out. We have to allow for applicants. Then we have to do the interviews, select the applicant. Then we have to do the background investigation. Once we do the background, we have to get them in for training. And then once they get through the training, then we could put them on their own.
But I also think that the new system the next gen is a more common system than the Hunt system. So there may be a chance there's a bigger pool of people already on that can dispatch.
Yeah, that's one component of it, but there's still all the other layers that we have of the, you know, we're specific to our fire department, specific to our EMS and protocols and.
Believe it or not, I mean, I watch the process as these guys go through it to go through the interview process of a dispatcher is very similar to the interview process of hiring a police officer. You know, the process is just as long, and maybe the police officer's longer in the academy and then their LTO, but hiring a dispatcher takes some time to get someone up and, like Chris said, fully trained and on the job.
But I guess the question is, maybe the question you were raising is whether we should put expected turnover or something. Again, like have one in the queue, because we know we're gonna lose one next year or something, you know, kind of, we're always sort of working towards that, if we really lose one a year on average or something.
Yeah.
Yeah, and actually, I digress. There is a way to hire faster, which we do all the time. If we can hire somebody that's already a dispatcher, that cuts down on a lot. If they're already trained and certified in certain things, that cuts the time down. So, yes, there is a way to cut it down, but I mean, that's already built into our process. Just like we look for certified police officers, we'll look for certified dispatchers as well.
And we have gotten, I believe we did hire, did we hire a?
Yes, actually, the last 2 that we have hired have been certified, and we're currently, in the process right now, trying to hire another one.
So it's, again, when you look at it, it is attracting some of the certified dispatchers.
Good question. Of the 5 that we have, what's the longevity of all 5 of them? How long have they been with Southbury?
One has 23 years. One has 17. And then the next 2 have maybe 2 years, and the other one's about coming up on a year, I think. And then we also have 2 part-time dispatchers. They're per diem, not part-time, they're actually per diem. They're dispatchers in other agencies. One's a fireman, one's a dispatcher. So their availability is very limited. We'll utilize them whenever we can, but their availability is limited. Plus, we're limited to how much we can use them too on the per diem status.
And there's no way to amp that up, you're saying?
That's tough because you have to find somebody that's already certified, because if we're gonna hire somebody per diem and put them through all the training takes just as long, and then, we don't have them for, if they're only working less than 21 hours a week, the training is cut down, in half, so the training's gonna take longer, and then when we do get them, they don't always give us, as much as we could use them for. So it's tough to get somebody that's not certified as per diem. If we can find somebody that's just looking to pick up some extra hours. Unfortunately, Southbury's not the only agency that's in this position, anywhere statewide, everybody's looking for dispatchers, so generally the dispatchers that are working have plenty of overtime where they're at. They're not really looking to go somewhere else and pick up some more hours, so.
So it's kind of like the question about hiring. I have seen some towns that use part-time police officers. And that question has been raised, couldn't you get someone working? By the time you get done with your certifications and your training, all the things you have to do and spend all that time and then put them to work, you don't get much value for the hours they're actually working. And that's why we don't even consider part-time officers. Anyone else?
One comment for the new folks here, and a reminder for some of the not-so-new folks. You'll notice no one's getting any raises in either of these departments.
We don't give raises, that's why.
Probably can't keep people.
And you might wonder, well, of course we're going to give them raises. How does that work in our budgeting scheme? The Board of Finance established a standard decades ago that we were going to handle salary increases through a salary increase account. Dan, can you pull that account up and we can
It's under labor,
explain it
Betsy.
to people?
Sure.
What we do is, you'll see an account where, this year we're giving a range of raises, or
Yeah, what we
what is the
do-
general theme?
We do 2 parts of this, and it's, Betsy, you scroll up. So on the bottom of this sheet, you'll see competitive equalization is 175. That's generally the number that we're estimating raises will be for next year. And then below it's 90,000 is competitive salary adjustments, and that's when we look at all of the salaries as a whole. If we want to make adjustments to salaries, like, let's say, the dispatch, if we want to increase it, that's where money would come from.
So the money for all those raises is in the budget. It's in that line. and there's a budget transfer that comes,
We do it the second week of July, because the Board of Selectmen votes the raises the first meeting, I believe, in July. We get it to the board.
so there are raises, there is a scheme, there is a methodology, and there's several good reasons why we do it this way. So I thought someone's going to ask the question eventually, and that's the answer.
Yeah, the only departmental budgets that you will see the salary increases are the collective bargaining units, because we know what the number is in those. So we know, for example, the Teamsters was 2.5 this year, for the police it was 3. So you'll see in the police line and the public works lines, you'll see the actual salary increases. And those are negotiated settlements.
So when we look at the new column that was created, the amended versus the budget and the salary line,
That's for
the
la,
transfer that we made.
primarily, most of that is the transfer for last year's salaries, yes.
And having gone through this process a number of times now, I think that new amended column is very helpful.
Yeah, when I looked at the budget, when we started to build the budget out, actually, it was Sam, myself, and people in my office, when we started to build out the new template, that was the one thing we all talked about would be very helpful for everyone, because now it makes sense that this is what we started at and this is what was changed throughout the year.
Okay.
There was one capital item in the dispatch budget. It was for the new recorder, and I believe that was, that was actually already in the IT reserve budget, so we moved it out of capital to IT reserve budget. And that's for our new phone system, I believe, right, Chris? The new phone system was not.
It records the phone system, all the radio transmissions for all the agencies.
Yep.
911.
So we're in pretty good shape in the PD budget, I think. Anything else? Thank you, Chris, for coming. No other
Chris.
questions of the boards?
Thank you, everyone.
Is that all we have?
That's all we have in the schedule for tonight. Unless
Wow.
you guys want to talk about any other budget. I know John had mentioned that he wanted me to look into our insurance and things like that. And, as we looked at our insurance this year, in particular medical insurance, our increase this year is going to be roughly about 12.2%. And we shopped it. We're still looking at alternate plans, but that was the best plan we have right now, and it's to maintain as good or better for what the employees have. So to keep that plan, it's going to be about a 12.2% increase. That, and coupled with, if you look at this budget, out of the $900,000 increase, total increase of all the departments, $600,000 of it is pure labor costs.
Wow.
So labor is about 70% of our budget, between salaries, and pension, and benefits, and defined contribution match, and things like that. So 70% of our costs are purely in labor.
And then on the medical, you continue to work with our consultant?
We're working with Art Mulligan, our
With Art.
consultant, and we met with him last week, and we're still fine tuning it. We don't have the final number yet from United, but we are a good estimate would be about 12%.
Okay.
And if we look at it, when we were fully insured, actually self-insured with the region, I looked, and we're still below where we would be if we stayed on the self-insurance plan. But we're covering all of the liability through United.
And we did get our refund last year from the region?
We did. It was $630,000.
Super.
Yeah.
Wow. Question. Quite a while ago, we did a study of wages and benefits relative to the whole budget, and we were a hair's breadth short of 50%. Now being 70, that flies in the face of our avowed intent of using technology to, quote, freeze our headcount, if not the labor cost, freeze our headcount. Maybe it's higher because we're spending so little on roads and our infrastructure because of what we've done. I don't know why, but it just seems to me that we haven't achieved that goal of freezing the labor component. And I would wonder if this coming year, we ought to take a deep dive into comparability with other entities. In private industry, you wouldn't put up with this. But this isn't private industry, I understand that. But I'm sure there is room for improvement. Job sharing, I know Jeff's put a floater system in when we get an opportunity to de-staff a department, and a floater can move around, and that saves money. I'm not arguing for a town hall full of floaters, but we ought to be looking, I think, at what other communities are doing and what their staffing levels are. Maybe other towns our size have 70%, or maybe 80%, and we're doing great. But it would sure be nice to figure that out and then target a fix if one is needed and figure out how to do it.
Yeah, I agree, John. I think at some point, we should do a needs assessment for every department. And I don't know if we have maybe someone from the Board of Finance, Board of Selectmen, and the Finance Office look at that, or do we have an outside consultant? But at some point, we probably should look at the actual needs. I know the floater system really has shown that there are areas where we may have been overstaffed, and the floater has stepped up and taken on that position, which has really worked out well. Can we look at other areas? There's a potential that we could do that, yeah.
I suspect it's, the Board of Selectmen ought to be driving this, because they're gonna have to live with it. The Board of Finance can only do so much yelling and screaming about we're spending too much that we don't need to, but when you get into running a place, you really have to be thoughtful about what babies in bathwater. And I would hope, Jeff, we, the town, in the next year, so that next year this time, or sooner along the way, depending on how it works out, we could address that 70%. It just seems awful high compared to what it used to be. It was 49.8% when we did our study.
How long ago was that?
Well, they tell me when you were over 80, every estimate you make has to be doubled for however many years you are over 50. So probably 60, 70 years ago. No. Formula. It was probably 10 to 15 years ago. When I retired, I think we did it. About 15 years ago, 20 years ago. Been quite a while. But the key point is we decided to get a technology department against the wishes of many at the time. We now have 3 full people over there, and we haven't, well, I'm sure we had efficiency somewhere, but it just doesn't, the gross numbers don't work. That's all
Yeah,
I'm saying. It's got a deep dive.
Just so, John, if we look at it just on a high-level overview, just payroll and payroll taxes are 50%. That's not counting the benefits.
Oh, we put the benefits in too when we
Yeah.
did it.
So that's where,
Wow. It's head count. It sounds like it's head count. Because I know, we've been giving 2 to 3% increases steady when there was no inflation and when there was super inflation, steady over time. And the grant, well, I don't know, just,
I
there's just a
also,
lot of numbers.
you know, there was also a charge to me to make sure our salary adjustments, because there was a concern about the pay structure for all employees. So that correction of the pay structure has influenced this number,
Yeah.
which is the right thing to do because you want to make sure you're attracting staff and retaining staff. So by doing that, if you look at over the years of and we started, just so those who are new here, we started with the lowest paid positions to get that salary adjustment, and it happened to be at the library because a lot of the people that worked there were underpaid, and the difference of where they should be made a big impact. We couldn't make the move so quickly across the board, we are given a certain amount of money, and we have constantly made sure that we are near the middle of the range for employees, and that's part of what's driven this cost up. So when you look at the deep dive, you look at the whole thing, and that's one of the reasons these salaries and benefits have gone up, because we did make salary adjustments because we needed to make good employees, be able to attract employees, and, even in the PD, we have made sure that we're competitive out there, and I will say, I think Chris will agree, you don't have to just because I'm the boss, but we're finding that we can actually attract people now. And the people who are here are seem pretty happy with what's going on. We are attracting police officers, where a lot of other departments have been having difficulties. Some is the reputation of our department, and some is, and also because we're competitive in the salary.
Yeah, and if I may, I think when we look at the issue of headcount versus technology, we have to take into consideration something a little bit different than the numbers. And over that period of time, work gets more complex. There are more tasks that have to be done. Spending the money on the technology could decrease staff, but the other side of it is allows those people to do a hell of a lot more, okay, with the same staff than they did before. I go back to Dan's office, and since he left here, there has been no increase in the number of people, but the issues that they are handling, okay, and expanding the breadth of what the finance office is overseeing with the money spent on technology and new systems and so forth, they are getting a hell of a lot more work, not physical work or hours work, but a heck of a lot more value out of those people because they know how to use this technology and they are applying it to be a hell of a lot more efficient in a broader areas, broader range of areas than they were before.
I think you'll even see that one where I noticed that a lot is in Public Works. We went only in a few years. Our Public Works Department went from riding around and, they do their work, but a lot of them now are carrying iPads with them, documenting drainage, and it's all feeding back in. So some of the work they're doing is a little higher level. And I also think that if you look at the budgets that have been brought in over the last 8-9 years, including this one that's difficult during an inflationary period, we've pretty much beat inflation across the board every year and delivered a quality of service to the taxpayers that vote for the budget because they're happy with how the town is operating, and they're happy with, it's interesting, always at tax season, people come in to pay their taxes, and you can really, you can poll a lot of people, but when they come out of that tax office after writing a check and paying their taxes, I've not come across any individual that was truly unhappy. They've been happy. Nobody likes to pay taxes, but the services they're getting in the town for the value, for what they're paying in taxes, I think they're pretty happy with. So we have to make sure we maintain that level of service also. And we've done that with technology is one thing because we know exactly what the numbers are and what's going on.
I always ask this, and it's a little bit different topic, but how's the revenue? Again, the revenue side sort of indicates more how the town has changed, right? And so, again, over 20 years, the town may have changed a bit too, right? So I guess, but it would again be interesting to me, we do maybe not as part of the budget season, but to look at, to have a kind of glance of the revenue side of things.
Yeah, it's, the revenue side is funny, especially being in Connecticut. Over 90% of our revenue is driven by property taxes and personal property taxes. And then another like 4% is aid from the state. So, but if we look at permitting and things like that, when we went to online permitting, you can see a considerable increase in the revenue by going to online permitting. I mean, it's year over year, it's gone up from before we were online permitting to now. I would say it's about a 35% increase in revenue.
Well, I mean, has there been residential development of any sort?
I don't know how much residential development we've had, but, I mean, I know COVID drew a lot of that because people were doing work on their homes. And Justin, you could probably, yeah.
No, okay. So basically, we're, you know, and as far as I understand from a commercial side, we're pretty much flat for reasons I understand now more.
Yeah, and if you look
But,
at our conveyance tax, Tom, this year, conveyance tax is down slightly over last year, so that's pretty much an indication of home sales.
Mhm. Okay, so John's working assumption that we haven't changed very much in terms of that side is kind of okay, I guess.
I don't know.
Okay, so it's not all doom and gloom.
No, then the only other thing I looked at is if we look at our other insurance, which is our workers' comp and our general liability, our cyber insurance is gonna be down again this year a little bit, but our workers' comp is gonna be up considerably because, like Chris was talking about, we had a couple of police officers that were out for over a year on workers' compensation due to injuries on the job. So not only does that drive up the overtime cost, but it drives up our workers' comp experience rating. So we're gonna get an increase in that this year as well. So that's about 7%.
Anybody else?
That's it for tonight.
That's it for tonight, unless there's something else you want to look at.
The one question I'd have, and I send out the emails, if there's any department heads that anyone would like to have come, let me know, and we'll arrange for them to be here. We're gonna have Public Works tomorrow. Public Works is four budgets, plus the roads, plus all the other stuff, infrastructure and things like that, so
Won't be an hour tomorrow.
I assume that's gonna be a long one. Thursday night, the fire department and Southbury Ambulance. You guys probably are aware of what's going on with Southbury Ambulance, so that'll be Thursday night, and I'm gonna send out a spreadsheet to everyone tonight about the ambulance, so you can review it before Thursday.
Is there a Wednesday night one?
Wednesday night, we have a meeting, but I guess we could go over the general departmental budgets, and that's why I asked if you guys wanted anyone to come, just let me know.
The other budgets weren't
They're pretty flat overall.
flat, they've not been changed. Unless you have a, you know, if you have a specific question on those budgets, sometimes just a quick call to Dan will give you that answer. You know, I hate to ask the department heads that they do a lot of work to come here if they don't have to, just to say hello and how's the budget, and they're like, it's everything I asked for.
One thing, I think if we could talk about it now, if everyone doesn't mind, is if we look at the Park and Rec capital requests, and Tim, I think you were on this as well. So Park and Rec Department, they put in some capital requests that, as we look at the budget, they were already in infrastructure, so we moved them out of capital because they're in infrastructure. The only thing that was not in infrastructure was the new pool vacuum, so we kept that in capital. But all the other items are in our infrastructure budget.
Yeah, to that point, our departments, and no fault of their own, sometimes struggle to understand how we finance our infrastructure. And they have something that they want to have done or needs to be done, or improvement or a replacement, and they put it in the budget, and it disappears, and they get all upset. Well, 80% of them disappear because we've already made provisions for what they're thinking about in the infrastructure. So Dan has now shown the original request, and then what goes out to infrastructure, what needs to be put off to future years for any one of a number of reasons. and then what the first selectman is going to recommend.
When Dan and I sit with the department heads, Dan will agree, it's a struggle every year to explain. We show it to them, and then some the next year, it's the same thing again. Well, it's not in, I want to capital, it's in the infrastructure. It's not, it's there.
If it's in the infrastructure and we're looking at Park and Rec, does that mean that that's going to be done this year? And I'm specifically talking about Community House Barn restrooms that have been closed since 2018?
So I think, Tim, with the community house barns, with the money that we have in the infrastructure plan, if the Park and Rec director would work with our Public Works director, yes, we would get to it this year. One thing I know that we've asked for, or in particular, I know our Public Works director has asked for a listing of all the things that need to be done by October, so this way they can plan for it. And I don't know if they've gotten it this year or not, but I know that's what they always ask for.
What we have there, that's Park and Rec, right? There's a dozen of these spreadsheets which support what each building or department needs for replacement of its infrastructure. And we try to make sure everything is there, so we're thinking about what needs to be replaced and when, and a guess on what it might cost. And we put all this together and we come up with a master funding plan that over time smooths out the cost for all this stuff.
And as we look at this, we're still refining this budget, and Blake is going to do a deep dive on it this year. And he's going to work with our office as far as, because there are some things that maybe we may have missed throughout the years, but we're going to make sure as much of this is on here as possible. So I know Blake, that's a project that he's going to be working on this year with the finance office.
So I guess, take Tim's question, where does community house?
So community house restrooms are actually in capital. There's a capital item of $12,000 that was put on there several years ago that we were deciding what to do. I don't know if you would see it in there, Betsy, but it's in the monthly reports we do for Board of Finance, and is on the web. You could see it on there.
Yeah, in this spreadsheet right here, you see community house bathrooms, ADA, 150,000.
Yeah, that was as we were waiting, Tim, because we were going to do a feasibility study, which we never did for community house. So we do have money in the budget for that as well.
Okay, so my question is, that $150,000 figure, is that in there?
It's not in there right now, no, because we were waiting for the feasibility study, and the number that we got on that, I believe, was the backup for that, I'm not sure, was included in it. I know Michael asked for the same thing last year, and there was an issue with doing that amount, so we were waiting for the feasibility study to see what actually we could do.
Yeah, but that feasibility study's been on the books for 4 years and it's never been done, but according.
But that's up to the department head to actually do it, and it hasn't been done.
Yep, but Blake, I believe, has had it done himself, so.
We haven't seen it yet, but if he has, that'd be great. I'd love to
I
see it.
think from the conversations that I've had with him recently, is if the Board of Selectmen is on board to make those bathrooms ADA compliant, he can get it done. So I'm sorry if I'm naive at all, but when I'm looking at a spreadsheet here and it says there's 150,000 in infrastructure, I'm trying to figure out whether it's in this year's budget or if that's just numbers for future use.
No, because I didn't move it to infrastructure, because it says needs feasibility study on the right. That's why we didn't move it to infrastructure.
I think that's a question for tomorrow night's discussion. You should,
Blake's coming tomorrow, right?
right?
No. I have a feeling we'll be talking about.
Yeah,
community
body
house
blow,
bathrooms.
body blow. Anyway,
Okay, so that's a
Yeah,
question, he'll be here
One other
tomorrow.
question for Dan. Just going forward, and you know me, I tend to focus on what we can do in the future. I mean, we spend a lot of time on budgets and expenditures and so forth and so on. I think we need to begin to look over a period of time and opportunities to have a greater increase in not individual assessments, but in the total grand list over a period of time. And when I go back, and I remember talking to people when Dolores Curtis was here, in the land use department and so forth and so on. And, Jeff can correct me if I'm wrong, but over a period of time, the town has, especially going back to the period when the idea was to buy property just to keep kids from going to school, from coming in, that we have the school budget going up. And over a period of time there, I believe, in looking at the maps here, even in Town Hall, that show all of these various little pieces of property that the town owns. Okay, I think there's an opportunity to have our land use people do a deep dive into those and see, like, if something was bought as quote-unquote open space 15 years ago because we wanted no more residential development, okay, to see if those are potentially usable as, my real estate friend over here says, and said the other day, we were talking and he said, there's only 20 houses available in Southbury right now for sale listed, and only 2 of them are current residents, are currently built. The rest of them are somewhere down the line.
There was 20 and 8 of them were actual houses.
Yeah, okay. And only 2 were actual houses that were there. So I'm just thinking, is it time to take a dive into this and say, are some of these lots usable? I'm not saying just sell what we bought as open space to get money back. But what I'm saying, if it doesn't tie in with the trail corridors and all of this stuff, the reason we bought it is no longer a valid reason. And we continue to be at the bottom of most towns in Southbury in the balance between how much of the tax burden is paid by residential taxpayers, by businesses. And I'm not saying we should just go willy-nilly, but I think it might be a good idea to put together a group led by somebody in the land use department, and maybe getting some of the guys on a strategic planning commission involved in this thing, and begin to look at and identify these things and says, is there? I mean, someone has come to me some time ago and said that there is a piece of property next to a farm that this person owns, okay? It was given to the town, or the town bought it. Okay? The owner of the farm would love to lease that land to farm it, but it can't be done. I think if we look at opportunities, we need to begin to balance, I think, a little bit, the income. We know the expenses are going to go up every year. That's, that's a given. We need to begin to put some more effort into the other side of the equation over a period of time. And I just say, I'm an old fart. I don't know how long I'm going to be here. But I just look forward and I say, you need to begin to balance this stuff a little bit. And balance the effort that is put into the income side with the effort that is put into controlling the expense side.
Well, I was debating whether we should call the economic development director to one of these meetings. Now, his budget is chump change, but his, purview of those kind of things is part of the reason, I thought, and I love him, and I think I love everything that he's done. But in the economic space, and I think part of it is for good reason. Like if you really look at what big properties are available, and again, Volpe Rosen, and we come back to some very basic stuff that it's hard to figure out what to resolve about it. But, I mean, he's the one that, isn't he supposed to be overlooking this kind of thing and having a big picture perspective on it? So I don't know, I guess, but maybe this isn't, again, in the budget process, isn't the right time to do it, but maybe we should do it like we have done at some other times at a Board of Finance meeting sometime.
So it's interesting having this conversation around the table here about the number of people, the labor costs. And again, what I'm hearing, if to remind everybody of of what we've done in the past, where it was, let's hire an economic development director, and then there's let's hire this position. So with and as I hear what I'm hearing here, you're asking the municipality, the administration, to add all these other layers of, well, could we take a deep dive into this in the land use department? Can we take a deep, can you take a deep dive? Well, then I'm gonna come back to you and say, okay, so we're running pretty efficiently as we are. It always makes me laugh that people call and say, well, Public Works, why don't they do this or that? Well, they have work to do, and when you add more on, the capacity, if you were not efficient, you could keep, okay, yeah, we have people for that, and we have people for this. How are you gonna, that's one the technology has made it so we can do a more analysis and a deeper dive. But what I'm hearing here is, if you wanna do more, it's gonna take more to do.
Well, I'm arguing less from a standpoint, I'm not trying to eliminate anybody's job or anything right now. I'm just trying to get a sense. I think what I've learned under the economic development director is that there's limited capacity to do anything of the sort that you're talking about without, putting a big sewer system in, or without really sort of changing the nature of the town, right? And so I think I've come to sort of accept that answer, right, more or less, but it's kind of a good answer to rehearse once in a while about why that's true. But maybe there are things that I'm missing and that are being missed that are better, again, commercial development kind of opportunities, right? Or, marginal kind of more residential opportunities or things like that, right? But I think, I mean, John and I, we get asked that question a lot, right? And so if there's maybe there is no good, easy answer to it, but we should rehearse why there's no good, easy answer to it once in a while.
Yeah, and I'm not talking about commercial versus residential or changing the nature of the town or the character of the town. What I'm saying, I just think it would be a good idea to take a look at these parcels, okay? If some of them can be developed residentially, okay? We know what's happened. We could use some more houses for sale. We could use a little bit more tax revenue for the town and the state. And if there were plots out there or lots out there that might fit, all I'm saying is if we don't look at it, we don't know about it. We don't know if there are opportunities or not. And if, the only way to know is to take a look and do a real inventory of these things and say, what purpose do they provide? I know over a period of time, some of these lots, we used to say, okay, as far as developers go, just give us something instead of paying a development fee. And what did they give us? They gave us the wetlands and they gave us the crap and all kinds of stuff. And then we have, what did we inherit? We inherited wetlands with retention ponds on that eventually we may have to do maintenance on and things like that. But if you don't, at least, I believe, if you don't at least look at them and say, what do we have? What are they? What might they be used for? Okay? And I'm not saying, we want factories or anything like that. I'm saying, I think you can get a couple of real estate people, or a couple of people that know, And I'm not saying add staff to do this. I'm saying maybe we get the planning commission and some of the people involved that are on that side of the business, and just take a look at it and say, what do we have? What purpose does it serve? Okay? And if there's an opportunity, should we look at something? That's all.
Well, when it comes to developing open space, number one, if it was purchased as open space and the idea was to prevent development from houses, I don't think that formula ever changes. Every house you put in brings in a certain number of children who are going to have to be educated. Our schools are reaching capacity again. If you add more housing, you're going to have to go to more schools. And as you increase your housing development and your commercial base, that's another thing that is that everybody thinks that if we get a bigger commercial grand list, it's lower taxes. That's never been proven to be true. There's no correlation between commercial development, expansion, and lower taxes. And that's been, Don Antilla did a study on that. It generally leads to more services. And some of our most expensive employees, if you look at the calls for services, are required at our commercial developments. Our plazas, as everybody knows, we're up at the plazas and the social media and whatnot. And so you need to be really careful not to create a problem of expansion of your government, higher cost, and never achieving and the expectation of controlling your taxes. It's never been proven to work.
A back of the envelope thing for people to remember, in Southbury, I think the average house with schools kids has 1.7 kids. Pretty reasonable number. The average cost per pupil in Southbury of a student, I remember it was $15,000 per kid some years ago. It's probably more than that now, but let's say it's $15,000. What's 1.7 times 15,000? 22,000, something like that. So in order to put those kids in the school, it's going to cost us, not for just one house, but a series of houses, it's going to cost you $22,000. Now, what do you have to have in a house assessed at 70% to get $22,000? Well, if our mill rate is 25, you'd have to have a house sell for $1.4 million times 70% times 25 mills. Well, then you're going to get enough money to educate the kids that came with the house. So you're going to have to build McMansions to make expansion of the housing market
Let me,
an economic driver. Yes.
1.7, I mean, considering 40% of our town is 55 plus, saying that we have an average of 1.7 kids per household does not sound like a reasonable number.
That
It
is-
seems like it's a little high, because most people can't afford more than one kid, and if half the population aren't having kids,
Those were the numbers from the study that was done by the economist we hired years ago.
yeah, that's what I'm saying, years ago. I think we need to relook at those numbers.
That could be changed, but we're talking, even if it's off by 10 or 20 or 30%, we're talking very expensive housing to break even on the education component. And
I
if the
think-
mission here,
Sorry.
if the mission here is to lower taxes for people, then you have to generate more income than you do expense when you do development. And that usually comes from commercial development. And we certainly should try to improve our commercial development in an aesthetic way.
I think that's part of the strategic plan also, is to consider increasing the grand list for commercial developments. And there were some ideas for how to go about that in the plan and how to measure that. And also, I believe there was a footnote on that study saying that that was a purely economic calculation, and that there could be other considerations that we might want to think about when it comes to whether or not we allow family housing in our town, if I'm
But,
recalling
like
correctly.
John says, you know, if the average cost per student is $17,000, that doesn't mean if you put 2 more students in the school, their budget's going to go up 34,000. There is some growth, okay? There is some, that number is not hard. And granted, Region 15 has been growing, okay? But they still have room. And I think, and I'm not saying what you do, but I'm saying if we at least don't look at the opportunities and understand what might be there, then you can't even consider what might work best with it. Because you don't know what you have, and we don't know what, at this point, what we have out there, where it is, what it is used for, what is the access, how much maintenance has to go into it, and what is the town doing already possibly to take care of it. There are a lot of things and a lot of facets to this. And if you don't know about it, then you don't know if there are opportunities.
I believe as part of the POCD process that we did do an inventory of open space because we have a goal in the POCD of 25% open space. So I think we did an inventory of the open space at that time a couple of years ago. So I think that work might already have been done, or perhaps a long way toward what you're looking for.
So it's a really good segue into, as we're having this meeting, Region 15 is having their budget meeting as well. So if anyone is interested, Joe Martino's going to drop the budget book off tomorrow morning to my office if anyone wants to stop by and have some light reading. Their budget book is pretty thick and has all this data in there, cost per student and things like that. So anyone wants it, he'll be here tomorrow at 8 with it, so.
I will say this. I've been here from the beginning when open space was first started to be purchased with the idea of controlling the cost of the schools because of because of students going in and the cost. A lot of what we're able to control with school costs and budgets, believe it or not, had all that land been developed, and there would be more schools. There's no question about there would have been more schools. And I think because of that, our housing prices in Southbury have been doing pretty well. I mean, they've been supported. Even our condos that are out there have increased in value tremendously because of, again, we look at our budget, the town of Southbury. If you look at this budget compared for the services provided compared to other towns, people are recognizing, and part of the problem with the pricing on our homes, people are moving to this town, and that's the problem with the inventory. So we must be doing something right also here.
Just one thing, when we had more students than we currently have, it was basically held, we were able to manage that with overflow classrooms that we purchased and had on the school property. So we had a lot of temporary classrooms that we used to help with any additional students more than we currently have. So we've been there.
Temporary, that seemed like it's from the beginning of the schools. I don't know what temporary means, but.
Well, they are actually gone now because
Yeah,
our
they're-
enrollment
yeah.
has gone down. So
Yeah.
yeah, they were temporary, although temporary meant years.
If everyone looks at the mill rate tab of the budget, I've attached a copy of the memo we received from our assessor regarding where our grand list has grown. It's the PDF copy there. And our grand list grew at about 1.05% this year, but commercial is actually down almost 1%. So, so Betsy, if you scroll down on that memo, keep scrolling. So these are the grand list numbers here, so you can see where our growth certainly wasn't in commercial this year.
Okay, because I mean, that's,
Are we done? Yeah, I'm sorry, Tom?
well, because, I mean, that's that's the counterinflation that we have to watch against. I mean, you always say that people don't believe it when they don't like it when we do reassessments and their taxes go up. But the reason why inflation goes up on the revenue side is inflation is supposed to go up over here. So if inflation doesn't go up over here to match the inflation over there, then we're kind of, in trouble in a way. So you're saying that this went up 1.5%? And we didn't make anything in permits or any other kind of side stuff this year? No.
I sort of remind everyone, the Board of Finance has had an unwritten idea that the cost of local government, because that's all we can control, should not exceed inflation plus the growth in the grand list. Just a big overarching concept. It costs, if things cost more, things are going to cost more. And if we get growth in the grand list, that gives us a little bit to work with. I think Dan did a study, and on that standard, we're doing awfully well.
Yeah, if we look over the last 5 years, if we took cost of inflation plus the percentage raise in the grand list, we're about, I think it was about $4.5 million better than if we did
The total cost of local government.
total cost of local government, yeah.
And I suspect I think we've done that in decades past, and we're doing pretty good by that measure. That doesn't mean we shouldn't watch every penny and figure out ways to do everything more effectively and efficiently. But so far, we're doing okay. We about done, Jeff?
I
you
think I'm good.
Your meeting.
Motion to adjourn? All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
And we're adjourned. Thank you.